Welcome back to Trust Your Eyes. Round 20 to find a clear top 9 teams, while the pressure is mounting on two Victorian powerhouse clubs. There is just 1 month to go, and every spot on the ladder is up for grabs. But we're going to start at the SCG. The Western Bulldogs dominated a beat-up Sydney team by 39 points. The Dogs have beaten second, third, and first on the ladder in consecutive weeks, the first team to do so since 1993. Is it finally time to trust them? And should Sydney be sounding the alarm? Well, you can't trust any team, not even Sydney as we've seen of late in this crazy 2024 season, but for the Bulldogs, everything is in working order. Each of the lines is humming. Rory Lobb and Liam Jones, and also Buku Khamis, worked really well in defence, intercepting the ball and repelling Sydney's attacks, especially when they had momentum. The midfield, which in times in the start of this year and the end of last year looked really thin and really slow. Just a simple injection of one player in Ed Richards has changed everything. It once again looks powerful, strong. It's been really consistent. And I thought Riley Garcia again, who's been unlucky to not be getting a game, played his role in that midfield system. And then up forward, well, it's been Jamara Ugle-Hagan the last 3 weeks. He's kicked 4 goals. Out of nowhere, he was terrible against Port Adelaide. But I think what the Bulldogs are doing with their forward line is really helping him. They're leaving one of Ugle-Hagan, Norton or Darcy on the bench at all times. So the forward line is actually a regular forward line. It's not really that tall. And it's giving space to everyone, including Cody Waitman, who's been buzzing around and flying up in the air of late. So each of the lines seems to be in good working order. But it is only a 5-day break in an important game against Melbourne. Now, I do think Sydney should be sounding the alarm. That tall forward line, which has been an issue all year, has stopped firing. And when Chad Warner, Heaney and Goulden aren't hitting the scoreboard, they look vulnerable, pair that with some injuries. And I think it is time to sound the alarm for the Swans. But we have to move to the big loser of the week. Essendon have lost 6 of 8 games, and a 7-goal to 1/3 term was the difference between St Kilda. What has gone wrong in the last 2 months at the hangar, and who deserves the most blame? Well, I'm a big fan of Brad Scott. I do believe he's a great AFL coach. So I'm going to put that performance against St Kilda 80%, 90% on the players. And when St Kilda came in that third quarter and Jack Steele kicked 3 goals, Cooper Sharman looked like Wayne Carey, on Ben Mackay, they just couldn't repel and stop them. Sure, I think there are some tactical issues that Brad Scott and his coaching group need to address. The team defense, especially in transition, is terrible. I thought they got Ben Mackay in to be a lockdown defender, and he's locking down nobody. He looks lost. He's in no man's land. There's stoppages outside 50, and he's roaming up to the stoppages. It's bizarre. Again, I don't know if it's the players or some tactical elements, but they need leadership in that part of the ground to sort it out. There's still 4 games left. Sure, they can still make finals, but at the end of the season, I think Essendon need to stop being a nice club. They need to have conversations with Dyson Heppel, Archie Perkins, Nick Cox, even a guy like Mason Redmond and Darcy Parish who signed big contracts. And they need to ask them the question, how much does this football club mean to you? Because we're giving you a lot of money and the performances aren't there. And then a guy like Peter Wright, you almost have to cull at this point. He is terrible at full forward right now. It's good if he gives a contest, let alone kicking bags or 3 or 4 or 5 goals to help them out. So there's still hope left, believe it or not. But at the end of the year, I think they need to have a hard look at this list and get rid of the weak, which has been hurting this club for a long time. But they aren't alone, as Carlton, with Harry Mackay laid out, lost to a tough Port Adelaide team. The Blues seem to have lost their mojo, and Port are quietly within a big shot of top 4. Were you more disappointed in Carlton or impressed by Port Adelaide? I was more impressed with Port Adelaide because they needed to beat a top 4 quality side in an interstate game, and they did that. I thought Butters and Rosie, who both had Chincotta at times, fought through, and Jason Horne-Francis in the second half, you could argue was the difference in the game. And then led by Boak and Wines as veterans, who probably had one of their better games for this season. And it was really impressive and a great win for Port Adelaide, who really needed it just for themselves. Now, I'm not going to be too tough on Carlton because Harry Mackay was laid out and there's no Tom de Koning, but facets of their game are struggling. The midfield, basically besides Cripps, looks really thin. Walsh has dropped away. Chera's playing in defence. and Hewitt just isn't getting the same amount of ball as he previously did. And then the defence, again, it's been a big issue for them like Essendon, and it's still falling away, and who knows how fit Jacob Wiedering is right now. Now, the 5-day break definitely helped Port Adelaide, as we saw in the second half, because Carlton did have a sizable lead, but it's not an excuse, it is a reason. But I'm on alert for Carlton. They have a massive game against Collingwood this week, and I think they're a big shot of beating this pretty beat-up Carlton side. And Port Adelaide hosts Sydney, and Sydney's pretty beat up as well, so I think I'd be backing Port Adelaide in that game as well, and they're hitting pretty good form at a pretty good time. Saturday night had two great games between Melbourne and GWS, and of course the Western Derby. The Giants and Dockers each won, so what are a few takeaways from each of the matchups? Well, starting with GWS, I think the forward line is humming again. Hogan's looking really good, and Brent Daniels was the highest rated player on the ground. Toby Green's hitting form. Then Darcy Jones and a couple of those other small forwards are starting to buzz around and cause problems. They were out of form for a good portion of this year, but seem to be coming good. And James Peatling's been really important, a couple game-saving tackles against Melbourne. And without Cornelio and Kelly, he's really stepped up out of nowhere. Never thought he'd be an inside mid, but even with his slight frame, he's showing he's pretty tough. And Melbourne's always hard to play against. That's what I got. Even when they seem out of it, they keep fighting till the end. The defence has always been strong, and they're going to cause some issues in the last month, even if they don't play finals. Now, in the Derby, I thought the Dockers showed a lot of resistance. To me, there was a bit of a big brother and little brother. I thought West Coast were bullying them, but Sarong and Brayshaw both said no. Sarong's a huge Brownlow shot, should be all Australian, and his running mate in Brayshaw is getting up to pace after a bit of a slow start to the year. And then for West Coast, Harley Reid is a serious star. Plays with aggression. Some people don't like it. I don't mind it. He doesn't back down. 29 disposals and 10 clearances. We already know he's a star, and he's almost at the superstar level already in his first year. Geelong got a much-needed win over in Tassie against North Melbourne, while the Hawks beat up on the Crows in Adelaide. What win was more impressive? Well, I'm a huge fan of these young Hawks, and their win was more impressive. Just on the Geelong one, I thought they cruised through the game. They let Harry Sheasel off the chain, he almost killed them, but then Tom Stewart was the best player on the ground, commanded the whole game, and North Melbourne couldn't get past him. I just thought the contest was relatively even, but Geelong just had way too much class for North Melbourne. But on the Hawks, it's a tough road game in Adelaide, 40,000 Crows fans, not that pleasant to play in as a opposition player and team. But again, the high half forwards like Maul, Watson and Ginnivan went to work. And it was Connor McDonald on the day, 28 disposals and a goal or two, I believe. He was the best player on the ground and was fantastic. Their midfield was so even. Newcomb, Day, all starred. Warple was really good again. They're playing as a team, and their team defence is really strong at the moment as well. It was a really impressive, mature performance. And this young Hawks side played like a veteran team that knew they were better than the opposition. And boy, did they show it in the second half. After the game was actually pretty close. So they're showing great signs. And I think their win was a bit more impressive than Geelong's over an informed North Melbourne team. Collingwood is still alive. Nick Dacos had a career day with 42 disposals. And his brother Josh had 32 as the Pies beat Richmond by 26 points. Did you see any signs of life from the Pies? I saw a little bit, but not a whole lot. Obviously, Nick Dacos was outstanding, 18 disposals in the first quarter, caused confusion, havoc in the Richmond coaching team, and basically he was the best player on the ground and they just couldn't get him in control. But his brother Josh, he had a lot of impact as well, swapping with Sidebottom. Sidebottom went into a wing. We know he's been playing in defence. And Dacos gave them great drive, 32 disposals. Was just really good. And Darcy Moore had his best game in a really long time. Back to basics. The opposition wasn't great, but he was spoiling, took a few nice intercepts and provided trademark drive. But I'm sorry, Richmond was just so bad watching the game. They were coughing up the ball, dropping marks, could barely get any handball chains going, and to only win by 26 points. I know Richmond got a few goals late. It just wasn't that impressive to me. However, because of Pendlebury's 400th coming up, I think they're a huge chance to beat Carlton. If I was tipping, I'd definitely be tipping Collingwood right now. They're a little bit healthier. We know Carlton's banged up, and Dan McStay, who was really impressive against Richmond, might be able to get on top of Wiedering. He's struggling a bit at the moment, and I think Collingwood, with their running power, can actually cause some damage against this Carlton team right now. To finish off, Brisbane had too much power for Gold Coast, despite missing Harris Andrews, Jack Payne and Darragh Joyce in defence. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust the Lions after a spotty start to the year? I think it's pretty clear that since round 12 they're 8-0, they're the best team in the competition right now, but it feels like people are sleeping on them. I don't know, people are talking about Hawthorn, the Western Bulldogs, but not a lot of people are putting a whole lot of focus on Brisbane, and they really should be, because basically every part of their game is in order. They got their midfields humming. Cam Rayner has exploded. He had 25 disposals and a goal. And then Dane Zorko is playing really well, and so is Lachie Neale, Josh Dunkley, and the Big O in the ruck. So everything's in order. They should get top 2 or top 4 at a minimum. And I think they've got a finger on the Premiership Cup. Not a hand yet, but they've got a finger. They're pretty healthy after those ACLs at the start of the year and a few injuries, but everyone's back. They're getting into form, getting a lot of games into the same team every week, which is important. So I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10 on the trust scale, because we've seen them play a lot of finals recently, but they haven't won the grand final yet. They did get there last year, and you'd think that they're well on their way to getting there again. And at this stage, if they don't get there, I think the season will be a little bit of a failure because of how well they're playing compared to the rest of the competition at the back end of this season. Thanks for listening to Trust Your Eyes for round 21. Good luck to all your teams, and I'll be back soon.